Finally, we have reached the end of our financial management, and where we are right now on module 9, financial decision models part 2. That's the last module. B2 is going to be over. So what do we have in this specific module? We have application of NPV, specifically on lease versus buy decisions. We will discuss what is internal rate of return, IRR, how to calculate it, how to interpret it, its advantages, disadvantages. Then we will discuss payback period method. It is one of the investment appraisal tool. And finally, a little modification in payback period method, which is called the discounted payback method. So the first area we have is the application of NPV, lease versus buy decisions. What is lease? We know. In our FAR, we discussed this in much more detail. Lease is an arrangement where the lessee acquires the right to use an asset for a stated period of time, for which he will make some regular payments. And then we know leases are classified into finance lease and operating lease. Finance lease means like as if you have bought the asset, which means you have to show it as an asset on your balance sheet with the corresponding liability on the debt side. And there are of course 5 conditions. If any of these conditions is met, the lease is classified as a finance lease. Let us just briefly discuss. It is not essential to discuss these here, but let's just have a quick overview. If the lease contains the transfer of ownership, then it's a finance lease. If there is bargain purchase option and lessee is most likely to exercise this purchase option, it's a finance lease. Or the third criteria, if the lease term is more than 75% of the life of the asset. Let's say if the life of the asset is 10 years, estimated life is 10 years, and the lease term is around 7.5 years or 8 years. So you can say that almost 80% of the life of the asset is covered under the lease. So it's almost over within the lease. So if the lease term is more than 75% of the estimated life of the asset, the lease is finance lease. This is the third one. In the fourth one, if the present value of minimum lease payments called MLP is greater than 90% of the fair value of the asset at the inception of the lease, it is called as finance lease. And last one, if the asset is so special, so unique that it has no alternative use, it is just for the specific arrangement between lessor and lessee, in that case it is called finance lease. If none of these criteria is met, then we have another classification called the operating lease. Remember, under the new leasing standard, the accounting treatment of finance lease and operating lease, they are almost the same. Previously, what we used to do under the finance lease, which was called as a capital lease under the US GAAP, you used to recognize an asset and a corresponding liability, right? Under the capital or finance lease. But under the operating lease, it was just considered as a rental arrangement. But now, whether the lease is finance lease or the operating lease, you debit the right to use asset and credit the liability. In other words, the accounting treatment is almost same. In finance lease and operating lease, the accounting treatment is almost same. You need to book the asset with the title right to use asset, and the liability is credited. So accounting treatment is similar. It's just that it does not meet any of these 5 criteria that we have just discussed. But if a lease is of less than 12 months duration, then it is treated as a rental arrangement. So we will discuss how do we make decision, how do we make use of NPV in the leasing arrangement. So let's move on to the next slide. Now, lease versus buy. Should we lease or should we buy the asset outright? There are 2 aspects to this decision. Let us see these one by one. In the first aspect is the investment decision, where we would like to evaluate whether it is financially beneficial for us to acquire an asset. For this part, we will focus specifically on the operational benefits or operating benefits of acquiring an asset. We'll just focus on the benefits, the cost savings or the inflows that the asset will bring to us. Does the asset give operational benefits? This is the first question you need to ask. Then what we will do, we will discount these future expected cash inflows at the average cost of capital. Discount the cash inflows from this asset using a rate which reflects the operating risk of the investment, that is the average cost of capital, weighted average cost of capital. So for the first part, investment decision side, we will focus only on the operating cash flows and we will discount these operating cash flows with the weighted average cost of capital. Let us just focus on this aspect first on computational side, then we will see the other part here, this one. This will be discussed later. Let's see this leg of the decision first. Bowler Incorporated is considering the acquisition of a new machine either through an operating lease or by purchasing the asset. The asset will cost $200,000 on January 1st, year 1 and will have scrap value of $25,000 at the end of year 2. Operating inflows are $150,000 for 2 years. These are operating inflows. He could have said that these are the cash savings. The first part only, the first leg of the decision, is determine the operating benefit or the operational benefit of this project. So just focus on this part only. We are going to do the remaining part later. So let us just focus on this part only. Now we have $150,000 operating cash inflow. First of all, you will have to convert these operating cash inflows into post-tax basis by just multiplying it with 1 minus tax rate, which I believe is given as 30%. The tax rate is 30%. So 150 into 1 minus tax rate, that should give you 105,000. Now this 105,000, which is the net cash flow after taxes, it must not be discounted. There are two such payments or two such amounts at the end of year 1 and 2. So multiplying 105,000 with what rate? There are two rates given. Bank loan at 10%, whereas company's weighted average cost of capital is 9%. We have just discussed that operational benefit must be discounted at the weighted average cost of capital. So just multiply it with the annuity factor of 9%, that's 1.79. 1.759, that will give you 184,695. So this basically is your present value of annual after tax cash inflow, or in other words, the operational benefit of this project. This is the first part. Now let us move on to the second one. The second part is now the financing decision. Now there are two further iteration to this. Either we could borrow the money from the bank, borrow the money, and then use this money to purchase the asset. Borrow and buy. And in the second part, we can just use a leasing arrangement, like whether finance or operating lease, depending upon the criteria met. Okay, so borrow and then buy the asset, or use the leasing arrangement. So which of these is cheaper? Is it cheaper to buy, or is it cheaper to lease? We will see these two separately. So what we will do in financing decision leg of this two decision model, focus on the relative benefit of tax allowable depreciation from buying versus the tax saving from the lease payments. Two things must be seen separately. If we borrow the money, buy the asset, we will get definitely the deferred tax shield benefit. And if we get it on lease, then there will be tax saving on lease as well. So we'll compare these, and then those cash flows must now be discounted at after tax cost of debt. This is a very crucial point to be noted. Since it's the financing decision, then you have to discount the cash flows on cost of debt, after tax cost of debt. Remember, and then we will decide whether should we go for borrowing and then buying, or should we go for leasing, and then we'll compare it with the benefits. So there are some important points here to be noted. When you borrow the money and purchase the asset with the borrowed funds, what you should do, you should take the purchase cost, the relevant cash flows, or calculate the present value of the lease payments, tax savings from depreciation in case if you purchase the asset, and the scrap proceeds also to be taken in this part. So buy through the borrowed funds will involve purchase cost, will involve tax from depreciation tax shield, and will involve scrap proceeds. If you go for leasing arrangement, in that case you have to make lease payments and you will get some tax saving the lease payment. So these two things now you will have to compare: borrow funds and purchase the asset, or lease it. Let us see the second two parts now. Now the remaining two parts said determine how the project should be financed. Should we borrow and then buy the asset, or should we go for the leasing and then we finally make the decision? So let us do the second part now. In the second part, we are going to calculate first if we borrow the funds and then buy the asset. That's the first part to it. And in the second part, we will simply treat it as a lease payment, like rental payment, and then we will calculate its present value. So in first case, we borrow the funds and we use the borrowed funds to purchase this asset. Since it's a 2-year project, year 0, 1 and 2, let us write down the relevant cash flows. When you borrow the funds and use that to acquire the asset, so basically it's the initial investment at year 0 of $200,000. Where did I get this amount from? The asset will cost $200,000, right? Let us read the remaining part also to fill in the blanks. The machinery is fully depreciated on a straight line basis over 2 years for both book and tax purposes. Borrower's financing options for the asset are 10% on bank loan, which must be taken on after tax basis, because all these cash flows are after tax based. So we have to bring in these discounted also on after tax basis. Just multiply it with 1 minus 30%. It will give you 0.70 times 10. So you will use 7% rate, which are already given to you. Okay, so first you will have the initial outflow at year 0 when you acquire the asset. This is what you can write as the initial outflow, purchase. It says that the asset would be acquired at $200,000, which is the initial outflow, and it will have $25,000 scrap value, which means if we calculate the depreciation, remember for NPV computation, I told you take the acquisition cost price divided with the estimated life. What you get is the depreciation. Now this depreciation will then be multiplied with 30% to give you what you call the depreciation tax shield. So depreciation tax shield is going to be 30,000 for year 1 and 30,000 for year 2. Now this asset will be disposed at the end of year 2 at 25,000. At that time the whole of this would be gain, and since there is a gain on it, we have to pay tax on gain. So take 30% of 25,000 and deduct it from 25,000, or else simply multiply 25,000, the amount you receive, and just calculate the after tax amount. This will automatically deduct the tax on gain. So it's going to be 25,000 times 70%. I hope you got the idea. 25,000 is the amount you receive, but there is a tax 30% on gain. So you simply multiply 25,000 with 1 minus tax rate. This will simply give you the amount you collect after tax, which is going to be 17,500. Okay, now these are the cash flows related to the borrowing funds and then purchasing the assets. So it's going to be $200,000 negative, $30,000 positive, and $47,000 positive. Since you have to discount these cash flows to year 0, so for this the discount factor is going to be 1.00. For this is going to be 0.935, first year discount factor, and for the last one it's going to be 0.873. If you multiply these and add up the results, it will give you a total figure of negative 130,483. This is the present value of outflows in case if you borrow the funds and then use it to acquire the asset. We have separated the operational benefits separately in the first parts. Keep it separate. I haven't taken any inflow from operational benefit. I've just taken the debt tax shield, the disposal value, and the initial outflow. So 130,483. In the third part, if it is operating lease, didn't meet any of the 5 criteria. So in this part, what we are going to do, these lease rentals of 92,500 with lease payments due on January 1st each year. So this means this is the amount that is paid at the start of each year. So remember, this is not the payment at the end of year 1, rather it is the payment at the start of year 1. The next payment will be at the start of year 2. So if you need to discount these cash flows, you will not use the ordinary annuity, you will use the annuity due, and not at 9%, at 7%, because since we are on the financing side, so we need to take the after tax cost of debt, 7%. So it's going to be 92,500. You need to take this number on after tax basis. Lease rental is a tax allowable deduction, so 1 minus 30% will give you 64,750. 64,750. This 64,750 now must be multiplied with the annuity due at 7%. Why? Because the first payment is made at the start of year 1, second payment at the start of year 2. So it is not the ordinary annuity. Ordinary annuity involves payments, cash flows at the end of the period. So multiplying this with the 1.935 gets you a negative of 125,291. Now we have some numbers to discuss. Operational benefit of the project NPV is 184,695. Okay. Then if you borrow the funds and acquire the asset, in that case the present value of outflow is 134,883. Or if you go for the lease rental arrangements, in that case it's 291. Finally, we have to now determine the NPV of the investment. What you will do now, you will take the benefit 184,695 and take the lower of these. We of course not are going to use this because borrowing and then acquiring asset is costly, 130. You will go for the one that has the lower present value of payment. Remember, present value of inflow should be as high as possible, whereas the present value of outflow should be as low as possible. So in this case, take the lower one and deduct this from the present value of benefits. What you will get is the amount 59,404. This is the net present value of the investment, and that tells us that yes, you should go for it. You should go for operating lease. That's the final conclusion. Normally, you won't find a question like this in your MCQs, not even the previous version of Becker, not in this one. So that's why we just spent some time on this question here, because you won't find it anywhere in the questions. So that's the conclusion now we have come up to. If the PV of the cost of best source, which we identified as, because there were two sources, either we could have borrowed the funds and acquired the asset. In that case, the outflow, the present value of outflow was 130, if I remember correctly, 483, right? This is borrowed and acquired the asset. Or in the second case, we would have gone to the lease rental arrangements. In that case, the present value of outflow negative was 125,291. So if the PV of the cost of best source, this one, is less than the present value of operating cash flows, which was substantially bigger than this number 184,695. So in that case, the project should be undertaken, and that's exactly the conclusion we have just drawn. The present value of operational benefit is 184,695, and out of these two options, this one is cheaper, and this is more than the cheapest option. Then you should go for it. Go for this project and acquire the asset using the lease rental arrangements. Now here are some impacts on financial statement of lease versus buy or borrow funds and acquire the asset. Let us discuss these briefly. When you borrow to buy, in that case, what will happen? Your debt will go up. Since your debt is going up, it will increase your debt to equity ratio, which is a measure of leverage, and it will also lower your interest coverage. More debt means more leverage, and more interest payment means that your interest coverage ratio, which is also called the times interest earned, it will fall. Of course, it's not viewed favorably by the investors, right? If you go for finance lease, in that case, you will debit the right of use asset. We discussed this earlier. And at the same time, you will recognize a liability. So when you recognize a liability, debt will go up. It will have the same effect. Your debt to equity goes up, and your interest coverage will fall initially. But as the interest element keeps on reducing with every payment you make on lease, so interest coverage ratio will then subsequently be better. And if you go for the operating lease, and I told you the accounting treatment of operating lease and finance lease under the new standard is almost the same, with slight difference. In this, you will also debit debt on your balance sheet. This will increase your debt to equity ratio. But the important point here to learn is that if it is operating lease that is less than 12 months old, this lease term is just 12 months, in that case it is just treated as a rental agreement, rental arrangement, and in that case the lease payment is considered just like a normal rent item, and it's treated accordingly. Next area, we have the internal rate of return, also called the IRR. What is IRR? IRR is a specific discount rate. It is specific to each project. The discount rate at which the net present value is equal to 0. In other words, a rate that equates the present value of inflows with the present value of outflows, which in most of the cases is the initial investment. So present value of outflows or your initial investment. The key point here to remember is that IRR is just a percentage. Although the net present value, which we discussed in our previous module, Although the NPV method highlights the dollar amount, NPV is expressed in absolute dollar amounts, whereas the IRR method focuses on percentage. The IRR is a percentage, a rate at which the present value of inflows is equal to present value of outflow. So let us just try to interpret. Let's say if we have a project A and we calculate its IRR, and let's say IRR is 12%, right? Now for that particular project A, the discount rate that we selected or the management selected arbitrarily, or they adjusted it for inflation or whatever they are, the rate desired was, let's say, hurdle rate, desired rate of return was 14%. So remember, whenever the IRR of the project is less than the discount rate, this would indicate that the project is not worth it. Project is not generating the return that we expected from the project. Right? If the IRR is less than the hurdle rate, IRR is 12%, the desired rate of return or the discount rate selected for this project is 14%, it means the project is not generating the return expected. Remember, IRR is the return generated by the project or the rate at which the present value of inflows is equal to present value of outflows. Now, to the contrary, if, let's say, if the IRR generated by the project is 18%, the project is generating 18% return, whereas the desired rate of return is just 14%. In that case, the project is desirable. Go for it. Project should be accepted. In this case, it should be rejected. Now, there are some limitations to IRR as well. In our NPV computations, previously we discussed that one of the assumptions of NPV computations is that the cash flow every year in year 1, 2, 3, 4 is assumed to be reinvested at the discount rate used in the computation. Let's say if the discount rate selected was 7%, it is one of the assumptions of NPV computations that the cash flows generated each year are reinvested at this rate, right? But when you are using IRR, that is the return generated by the project, let's say the IRR generated is 13%. This assumption that the cash flow generated by the project are reinvested at 13%, that is unrealistic. Maybe there is no such opportunity in the market available to reinvest the project at 13% rate. Secondly, IRR is the rate at which the present value of inflows is equal to your initial investment or present value of outflows, right? That makes sense. So ideally, you should expect a single rate like 11%, 15%. But unfortunately, if your cash flows are unconventional means maybe you have outflow in year 1, inflow, then outflow, then inflow, then outflow. These are called unconventional cash flows. Unfortunately, for such projects, when you calculate IRR for such projects, you will be surprised that for such projects, there will be multiple IRRs. Let's say if this is the NPV positive, this is NPV negative, and these are the rates given on the x-axis, discount rates, right? So here the NPV, here NPV 0, it means this project has 2 IRRs, this one, and let's say if it could be extended further, so this project has 4 IRRs. Why? Because every time the cash flow changes turn, it becomes positive from negative or from negative to positive. Whenever it turns, there will be new IRR. So this is the problem called the multiple IRR problem, which you should be thankful is not included in CPA course nor in CMA. It is done in detail in ACC and CA. We calculate what you call the modified internal rate of return, and that is luckily not a part of your syllabus, otherwise could have been much more harder. So alternate cash flows, when the cash flows are unconventional, you will have multiple IRR problem. And then one other limitation of IRR is that it is just a percentage return. It doesn't give you the actual dollar impact of the investment, whereas we need the dollar impact of the project. That is the reason NP is considered to be the most superior method of investment evaluation. Next, we have the payback method or payback period method. Payback basically means it's the time required or time taken by a project to repay the initial investment. Let's say if I have invested $100,000 in a project and this project is 10 years long, let's say. After how many years will I be able to recover my initial investment? After how many years will my initial investment be recouped? This is what you call the payback period. Let's say if it's 3 years, it means within 3 years I will recover my initial investment. So the period within which the amount is recovered, what you invested, is called the payback period. Now, why would you use payback period? There are two reasons to it. First, it is a measure of liquidity. The sooner the project pays you, the better. A project that pays you within 2 years, it means it is much liquid. You will recover your investment within 2 years. But a project that pays itself off after 20 years is illiquid. You will have to wait up to 20 years. So this is a good measure of liquidity, payback period, and it's also a good measure of risk. How? If a project pays itself off quickly, it has less risk. You recover your investment quickly. But if the payment is recovered after 10 years, longer the period, higher the risk. So you can say if the project payback period is shorter, it is more liquid, it has less risk. Conversely speaking, if payback period is longer, it means liquidity would be lower and the project will have more risk. Now there are two types of questions that you might come across. Those cash flows that are uniform, the cash flows are the same year after year. In this case, we can simply calculate our payback period by taking your initial investment and dividing it with the average incremental cash flow, that is the same cash flow every year. Okay, here we go. Helena Company is planning to acquire a $250,000 machine that will provide increased efficiencies, thereby reducing annual operating cash flows by $80,000. Your operating cost would be reduced by $80,000. This is basically your saving. The machine will be depreciated by straight line method over 5 years life with no salvage value at the end of 5 years. Assuming a 40% income tax rate, calculate the machine's payback period. Now, first of all, this is what we are investing, $250,000. Now we will have to calculate the yearly cash flow. We don't have to make for all the years, we just need to calculate for the first year because cash flow would be the same from year 1 through year 5, right? So how do we calculate? There are two methods I hope you would remember. Either you can use the accounting method, AM, or you can use the cash flow method. Both should get you the same answer. Under accounting method, what we do, we take our operating costs, saving and operating costs, which basically is your revenue. From this, you deduct the depreciation. What is going to be the depreciation? $250,000 is the cost of the machine. It will last 5 years. That means the depreciation every year is 50. So 80 less 50. This gives you your 30,000, which is, we can call it as your operating income. 30,000. Now you need to pay tax on this amount. This is operating income. Pay tax on this amount. Tax is at the rate of 40%. That is 12,000. So what you get? You get net income. And net income is 18,000. Right? I told you whether you can use the accounting method or cash flow method, there should be the same. Net income plus add the full depreciation expense. And depreciation expense here was 50. So 18 plus 50 gives you $68,000 cash flow every year. Let's say you don't want to use the accounting method, you go for the cash flow method. In this case, simply take in your annual cash savings, calculate it on after-tax basis. After-tax basis, we need to multiply it with 1 minus tax rate, just multiply it with 60%. 80,000 multiplied by 60%, that gives you 48,000, right? This is the after-tax cash flows. And to this, you simply add your depreciation tax shield. How do we calculate depreciation tax shield? It is simply equal to depreciation expense multiplied by the tax rate, which is 20,000. See, 100% same answer. 48,000 plus 20,000, exact 68,000. So you can see whether you use the accounting approach 68 or whether you use the cash flow approach 68. Under both cases, you will get the same answer, right? So now this is not over yet. We got our annual cash flows, whether under accounting method or the cash flow method. It is 68. Now we will apply this formula. Our initial investment was $250,000. Our incremental after-tax cash flows was 68,000. So dividing your initial investment of $250,000 with 68,000 should give you 3.676 years. This is the time it will take to pay back your initial investment. When cash flows are non-uniform, meaning the amount every year is not the same, like in this case, what you should do, you should just apply a very simple method. Take your initial cash flow, write in your calculator as negative 200. Alright, and then what you should do, simply add the first year cash flow plus 90,000. My calculator still shows 110 negative. Add the second year cash flow. It is much quicker when you're doing it yourself. My calculator still shows negative 30,000, which means in the first 2 years my initial investment was not recovered. Now I have to recover $30,000 only from the third year cash flow, which means 2 years for sure. And what part of the third year? For this, what you're going to do, take what you need in the third year and divide it with just simply 30,000 out of 75,000 in the third year. So you need to take full 2 years, but the third year will be proportionally 30,000 is required from out of the 75,000 cash in the third year. So it's going to be just 30 by 75. It's going to be just 0.4. So which means the total payback period is 2.4. This is much quicker rather than first writing the cumulative cash flows. Simply write negative 200,000 and add up these numbers, and wherever you're close to completing your initial investment, just do this what I've just done. So it's 2.4. So some advantages and limitations. The first advantage of payback method, it is easy to use and easy to understand. Very simple. How many years will it take for me to recover my initial investment? And it emphasizes on liquidity. How quickly can I recover my investment? How quickly can I recoup my investment? And to some extent, it is also a measure of risk. The longer the payback period, the riskier the project would be. So these are the advantages of payback period method. What are the limitations? This is the biggest limitation. It ignores time value of money. It totally ignores the cash flow received in year 1 or the cash flow received at the end of year 10. TVM totally ignored. It focuses only on the cutoff, means I need to recover my cash flows within, or my initial investment within 3 years. It focuses only on the first 3 years. What about year 4, 5, 6, 7? Maybe you might have significant cash flows after year 3, but it focuses only on particular cutoff year, 3rd year, 4th year. I just need to recover my investment within a specific number of years. This is the main problem with it. This is the main problem. It is short term, focuses on the cutoff year. Many subsequent years could be very, very profitable for the company. So in other words, it ignores profitability because it ignores all the cash flows coming after the payback period. Now the last topic we have is the discounted payback period. This is little modification of your simple payback period method. What we do in this method, we have just introduced the TVM into computation. So this is sometimes also called the break-even time. The time it takes to equate your present value of inflows with the present value of outflows. The time when these two are equated. It might appear something like IRR, but it is not. It's called the break-even time. The time where the present value of inflows is equal to the present value of outflows, or in other words, your initial investment, because I keep on saying present value of outflows, it is basically your initial investment. So it focuses on liquidity just like the payback period method. Discounted payback is also the one focusing on liquidity, and the good thing about this discounted payback method, it incorporates the time value of money, which was ignored in the previous method. It has same drawbacks, like it ignores profits after the cutoff date, and it also ignores the profitability because just focuses on 3 or 4 years, but after that there could be some significant cash flows. Unfortunately, they would be ignored under the discounted payback period method. So let us do a simple question that will explain the idea of discounted payback period. Take this example. There is a project that requires $200,000 investment, and these are the cash flows in the year 1, 2, 3, 4. In the previous version of this question, we simply took negative $200,000 and added these numbers, and we determined our payback period to be 2.5 years. What you are going to do, you are going to calculate the present value of these future cash flows by multiplying them with the selected discount rate. And that's what they have done. They have taken these cash flows 90, 80, 75, 60, multiplied them with the discount factor. These are now the present value of the cash flows in year 1, 2, 3, 4. You will do the same thing now. You will write negative 200,000 on your calculator. Right? Add 81,810, still negative. Add 66,080, still negative. Add So these two first years, second year's cash flows are not enough to recover my initial investment. At the end of year 2, I still have to recover 52,110 from the third year's discounted cash flow 56,325. So 2 years are covered for sure, and 52,110 is what I need from the third year's discounted cash flow. That comes out to be 0.935, which means the payback period is going to be 2 years plus point, that's 2.935. Always remember, your simple payback period would be shorter, but when you discount the cash flows will shrink. Resultantly, your discounted payback period would always be longer, 2.4 versus 2.935. So guys, that completes your last module. Your financial management is completed. Alhamdulillah.